Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, God bless you. JB Hixson is my guest today. We'll get to him in a couple seconds, but good news, I was notified I'm back on YouTube after being penalized and being removed by violating their community standards, which I shared a little bit in detail, I think, if I remember right, on the Not By Works podcast. So, by the way, and thank you for following us on Rumble. If you have not yet, go to Rumble and look up Freedom Project and follow the, actually you can download the app as well, Freedom Project media app. And also follow me on Rumble because I've been able to post continually, even when I was in YouTube jail. So JB Hixson, Not By Works, thank you so much for coming back on. We're going to continue our conversation, brother. Good to see you again.
Hey, likewise, David. Always a pleasure. You're such a gracious friend and commentator, and just love your work and always enjoy our conversations.
As do I. And before we get to what I mentioned, continuing our conversation, people go, what conversation? We'll talk about that in a minute on the Not By Works podcast. But you have a book that you're coming out with, a third edition, Getting the Gospel Wrong. Tell us about this, why do the third edition, and go ahead and share.
Yeah, you bet. So this is actually the first book I wrote out of the 13. It was originally my PhD dissertation back in 06 or 07, and then we kind of recast it and published it. And through the years, it's just, as attacks on the gospel increase, we've had the opportunity to revise it, add chapters, and so forth. And that opportunity came up again here recently. The publisher that I had worked with for the second edition sold to another publisher. They reached out and said, hey, can you do a third edition and add another chapter? So we added a chapter in this latest edition on the fake gospel, the AI gospel, of what I call the pretend gospel, and then tweaked a few things here and there. So if folks have gotten my previous editions of Getting the Gospel Wrong, it's substantially the same, but there is a new chapter and a new preface that I wrote at the beginning, and I encourage you to check it out. It really expresses the running theme and heartbeat of NBW Ministries, which of course is the clarity, accuracy, and urgency of the gospel, even though a lot of the stuff we've done in more recent years is Bible prophecy related. Through it all, we want to make sure we sound a clear alarm about the gospel, that people need Jesus. They need to trust in him. He's their only hope. He died and rose again for their sins. And you can do a lot to prepare for what's happening in this world, but if you don't take care of your soul, if you don't make sure you're right with God by faith alone in Christ alone, then all of that doesn't matter.
And one way that people obviously get the gospel wrong is thinking they can work and somehow get in that way. And that takes me to notbyworks.org, your website, notbyworks.org. And I'm looking at some of the people you've had on your podcast, the NBW Ministries podcast lately, troublemakers that I've had on as well. Ken Michael, Andy Woods, Tom Hughes, Lee Brainerd. Oh my goodness, you've had John Haller. And who's this David Fiorazzo guy? Let's talk about that one. So August 1st, I was on your podcast, which... Wow, is it last week already or whatever? Yeah. Thank you. And we had a really good conversation, and a lot of it was about politics, and that's where we'll go today. But the title of that was, How Can Christians Navigate These Uncharted Waters? So we talked about a lot of things, and basically I shared our Rumble channel because people were not able to find me on YouTube for a short time because I was penalized for mentioning some headlines that 6 states sued Pfizer and I think one other one. But Pfizer for sure, over misrepresentation on the C-19er jab. And all I did was share the headlines, and then I quoted Rand Paul, who's done some amazing work. He's still exposing Fauci and the lies, and there's such a lack of accountability. So you guys pray for Rand Paul as well and his protection. But so, JB, we had a great conversation, and what I wanted to do today I really thought we touched on some really important topics for Christians in election and campaign season. There it is at notbyworks.org. How can Christians navigate these uncharted waters? Because we've got some interesting things happening geopolitically, but right here in America with the assassination attempt on President Trump, with now we've got Kamala Harris. Will she actually be the candidate? The weakest possible Democrat candidate, I think, in history, that you would think has no chance of winning, but the media is really doing a whitewashing of her record, her beliefs, her worldview, her background. And as Tom Cotton recently tweeted, Kamala Harris won't speak with the press, but she will speak with pro-Hamas radicals and suggests she's open to a full arms embargo against Israel. Your thoughts on just that one point, JB?
Yeah, it really is puzzling, David, to think about Kamala, and it's really hard to figure out what they're angling for.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that a ticket that involves Harris and what's his name, that's what I call the running mate, because he's really a big nothing burger. I mean, I could have listed. Obviously, I'm not a progressive, I'm not a liberal, and I'm not a Democrat, but I could have listed 100 candidates that would have seemed like a stronger running mate than this guy from Minnesota. But anyway, it's hard to figure out what's going on. My best guess is they're angling for another stolen election, and it's going to be so far-fetched, so hard for anyone to fathom that ticket could beat Trump with his popularity, that it will foment some unrest and some civil disorder and all kinds of craziness. That's one option. But you're right. They are gaslighting America right now. They're completely recasting her, remaking her. Yep. If someone had gone into a coma 2 years ago or even 4 years ago, and then just now woke up and saw the headlines with Kamala Harris, they would be like, "What in the world? How could this possibly be?" She was the last place candidate running for Democratic nomination. She had a meteoric rise, basically kind of got favors all the way to the top in California. She's radically left. I mean, radically left. One of the most liberal senators ever. And yet suddenly here she's, everybody's answer to all the world's problems. And so I don't understand it. But of course, my worldview, and I think we're going to get into some of this, is that the Luciferians long ago really took control of the election process in the United States through digital vote tabulation machines. And really going back to 2012, when it was Romney versus Obama, I've been sounding the alarm about this every 4 years. And, I get some people that are upset at me because they don't share my view. And I respect that. I totally do. And I want to be gracious. I'm not telling people how to vote or whether to vote or who to vote for. I'm just telling you my studied opinion on where we stand. And I'd love to talk more about that.
Yeah, even before that with John McCain, and I'm thinking, wow. So we had Sarah Palin, which, I really admired her and what she did, and her record and her faith. But man, she was attacked viciously. And since then, the media has not let up on any Christian or conservative or truly Republican in the truest definition of the platform and the word. They're just on the attack. They're attack dogs. And right now they're doing a disservice to the American people on purpose, covering for Kamala. And that's how I'll put it. I mean, she's got ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Her background is so radical, as you mentioned. And Trevor Loudon, I've had him on this podcast, and he said people like Kamala Harris would not pass a security background check that any other American would have to take for a government job. But yet here she is, and many others. There's a plug for Trevor Loudon. But I want to mention just some of the things about the new guy, the VP, at least now, Tim Walz. Minnesota. What happened in Minnesota with the George Floyd? How did that all go? Well, he helped ignite what happened in Minnesota. He said he stalled on deploying the National Guard for an entire day. People don't remember this, and they're trying to make Walz out as a moderate. He blamed the city for not submitting the right paperwork. So the National Guard didn't get out there, and that's the reason, right? And there's so much more. After the attempted assassination on Trump, Walz called Trump and his supporters fascists. This was just days after. So they're not changing their rhetoric. And this is just the kind of thing that, I mean, he has the most radical abortion laws in the country, 0 limits. By the way, every year, 5 to 6 babies are born alive. They survive an abortion attempt, but then they're murdered legally under laws that people like Tim Walz and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama supported, meaning you cannot protect. I think there was an act, the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, about a decade ago that people like Obama voted against. Well, Kamala Harris is in that boat. So anyway, I could go on about what Walz did, but what he did with taxpayer money and during COVID and what he did to the state. And Minnesota has become a haven for Islam, for radical Muslims.
Second Amendment too. He's very bad on that. I mean, Minnesota's a terrible state for that. Even though it's a big hunting state, it's ironically but not very good on gun rights. But I mean, it's just par for the course. I mean, that's how far the left has gone, which they're so far off the reservation now, the closer we get to the return of Christ, that it makes the Republicans able to be also far left, but yet not quite as far as the extreme progressives of the Democratic Party. It's that Overton window, David, that the Luciferians, ever since the 60s, when, as we know from leaked documents at the CFR, they intentionally decided to create a two-party system where they control both sides, that as long as they can make sure that the right is less evil than the left, then they can keep moving that window. And so now you've got two candidates, one who thinks the platform is you can kill any baby anytime for any reason, even after birth, as you said, in some cases, which is horrific.
Yep.
It's just a matter of degree, because I know people are rightly disturbed by some of the views of the left and of the Democratic Party. But on some of the big issues, such as the right to life, it's really just a matter of degree, because the Republican Party has now officially changed its platform. They say that in certain cases it's perfectly acceptable to kill an innocent baby in the womb. And they also have said, and Trump is on record with this as recently as the debate, that he's in favor of the abortion pill, which can kill an innocent baby for any reason in the womb. And so life begins at conception. That's what the Bible says. All life is sacred. Killing a 2-year-old child is no worse than killing an infant in the womb. And until people begin to understand that, I think they will be content to vote for any candidate that just doesn't kill as many babies, and somehow they think that's better. But it's they've moved the target, the baseline, if you will, so far to the left by design, which is a sign of the times, that it forces Christians who really in good conscience believe they need to vote, that they certainly can't vote for a Democrat, but it sort of forces them to hold their nose and vote for a candidate that more and more these days is holding views that do not reflect a biblical worldview.
I agree. And it's really hard for me to say that. They have redefined pro-life. Now you have to add these asterisks, after that. It's like, well, except for, and wait a minute, if God determines life, as the Bible teaches, at conception, in the womb, that's the life that is worthy of protecting and has value, no matter what stage of pregnancy, right? No matter what size, no matter what level of development, no matter the environment, and the degree of dependency on the mother. So we have a problem. That's just part of it. JB, you said something very interesting, and we've got to take a break in a minute. The lines have shifted, and it's interesting that they always seem to go to the left. Now, the compromise, and I've seen this happen for years now, not with all Republicans, not with all political candidates, but we've seen way too many compromise, and maybe to keep their job, maybe to whatever, but it's doing the country a disservice, because there are well-meaning Christians out there going, well, now what am I going to do? And we'll talk about that when it comes to voting and the election more with J.B. Hixson when we come back on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbingers Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
If you know someone who might be interested in sponsoring Worldview Matters, send us an email, worldviewmatters@fpeusa.org, and let us know you might be interested. And you can also go to our website if you missed that. That's worldviewmatters.tv. We're thankful to Harbingers, Patriot Mobile, Freedom Project, and because of you, your support, your prayers, and donations, we're now on harpazo.com, Pioneer Network, Beck TV, Harbingers TV, God's Learning Channel, and more to come, Lord willing. So we're back with J.B. Hixson. Before we get to what are we to do, which is kind of what I left off with, meaning Bible-believing Christians, J.B., let's get back to the media briefly. Because the leftist, progressive, demonic, maybe I'm being redundant, the media in America can no longer be trusted. There's record low levels of trust in the media that they're actually serving all the people, because they're not. Not to say there are not a few honest journalists, Alex Newman, and a handful of others, but they don't have the big power, the big megaphone of the big three networks, the mainstream and, whatever, the cable. So people know, most people watching this show and fans of Not by Works, they know we can't get our news from the media or believe what they say most of the time. What are we to do? What advice can you give people to be informed and not be overwhelmed? And we can't fight this battle and win, meaning the battle of information, any longer.
Yeah, I mean, the media has been complicit for a long, long time in the big picture agenda. It's a controlled opposition paradigm, which goes all the way back to the Middle Ages and Machiavelli, the whole Hegelian dialectic, when in the 18th century Friedrich Hegel kind of gave it a name, so to speak. But it's this idea of making people think they have a voice by controlling both sides of the issue, the system. And so there are real issues, absolutely. Yeah. Certainly there are real issues. Now, I contend that the platforms of the two parties are almost indistinguishable. It's just a matter of degree. So people all the time will say, well, the left is going to do this and do that. In fact, I had an email recently. Someone said, well, if the left gets in power again in November, they're going to shut down the churches with another pandemic like they did last time. And I just had to chuckle and I go, talk about revisionist history. It was Trump and Pence that shut down the churches the last time, not a Democratic president. So, they control both sides. And I think the media right now, we're seeing it more than ever before, is completely carrying the water for Kamala and recasting her, ignoring the facts, ignoring the history, and just painting her in a completely different light. So, but that's nothing new. It's just more profound now. But you're right, David. The angst that I see on Christians' hearts and faces when I talk about these matters at conferences and at our resource table when we're out in the lobby and so forth, it's palpable. I mean, people are sort of waking up to the reality that suddenly we have a choice between evil and eviler. And the principle of the lesser of two evils has been around for a long time, and yes, we certainly understand it. You don't want to vote for the worst of the two candidates. Who would, right? But it's just gotten so blatant now that Christians are really struggling. And so I encourage people to check out a Prophecy Night video on the Not by Works website or app, the NBW Ministries app, from July 30th was the date. If you just scroll back to July 30th, I shared my heart graciously, honestly, from the heart on my views of what I personally feel about the coming election. But I want to reiterate, as I did then, that I completely get it, and I respect each individual believer's decision to vote or to vote for Trump. But there are other candidates on the ballot, and God is not, this is what I want to remind people of, God is not obligated as the almighty creator of the universe to limit himself to a two-party system in the United States of America. The same God that protected Donald Trump from an assassin's bullet certainly can work outside in a miraculous way of the two-party system. So when people say, well, I can't vote for a third-party candidate because I'm throwing my vote away, what they're saying is God's not able to use your vote out of conviction and moral obligation. You must choose Coke or Pepsi. And as long as you choose Coke and Pepsi, God is sovereign. But if you decide you don't want Coke or Pepsi, forget it. Somehow God is no longer sovereign and able to do a miracle. So, if enough Christians, I know from a human standpoint, it sounds impossible, but with God, all things are impossible. But if enough Christians would say, you know what, I can't vote for a candidate who believes it's okay to murder some innocent children in the womb, who thinks LGBTQ is the new wave and is all for it, celebrating it every time there's an agenda. And he said publicly that I'm going to help advance your cause in that regard, and who wants to give part of the land away to the Muslims, part of the Holy Land. I personally can't do it, but I have friends, colleagues, people I'm very close to that, having weighed all the evidence, prayed about it, they feel like at this time, for such a time as this, their best option is to vote for the Republican candidate. And I respect that. That's between them and the Lord.
I'm a pepper. He's a pepper. She's a pepper. We're a pepper. Anyway, not Coke or Pepsi.
If you want Dr. Pepper, forget it. You're out of luck.
I just want to maybe get you to clarify what you said about the platforms, and they're the same. They're almost the same. It's just a matter of degree. I know on the life issue, unfortunately, and that's a huge one. But what about open borders, trans ideology? The Republicans aren't in favor of mutilating young children. What about the socialism on steroids and high taxes? And what about Israel? There seem to be anti-Semites on the Democrat side. The Republicans seem to be generally pro-Israel. And you see communist policy in America. When it comes to the left and what they're doing when it comes to censorship, look what they did during COVID, silencing opposition, putting out their talking points and their propaganda, but then saying everybody else, that's misinformation. So these things the Republicans do not support. So when you say it's just a matter of degree, can you maybe explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think certainly there are some issues that the Republicans hold the high ground on and are completely right on. But several of the ones you mentioned, they are a matter of degree. As I said, Donald Trump is on record supporting a two-state solution for Israel. He and Jared Kushner want to give part of God's Holy Land to the Muslims. Well, that's never going to happen. That's not what any Christian should be in favor of. It's God's land. It's his holy land. And he's not going to allow it to be divvied up in some kind of a failed attempt or futile attempt at peace. So that's a matter of degree. Now, is the Republican side as anti-Semitic as the left? Absolutely not. I mean, they're off the charts anti-Semitic. But again, it's a matter of degree. It's not like the right is 100% supportive of Israel. Same thing with the trans agenda. The Democrats might be, wanting to radically say that a 10-year-old can have surgery without his parents' knowledge to slice and dice and cut him up or her up, which is horrific. And Republicans are against that. But they are absolutely in favor of gay marriage, the transgender movement. Trump, this is a direct quote from Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He said, quote, "We are fighting for the gay community, and we are fighting and fighting hard." And he said this to loud cheers of LGBT people, hundreds of them gathered at Mar-a-Lago. He said, "With the help of many people here tonight, in recent years, our movement has taken incredible strides. The strides you've made here are incredible." Well, it's not my movement. Whose movement is he talking about? I'm not a part of the trans LGBTQ movement. So again, a matter of degree. Is it as radical as all the stuff on the left? No, but it's there. And then of course we've already talked about abortion. It's just amazing to me. I mean, I would hope that if the Republican platform was in favor of killing 2-year-old children in certain circumstances for convenience, or if they were, having a rough life, that Christians would stand up and say in unison, absolutely not. That's what the Republican platform is now saying you can do with unborn children. In certain circumstances, it's okay to kill them. And to me, that there's no difference in God's eyes between a human life in the womb and outside of the womb. All life is sacred and valuable. So I do think it's a matter of degree. Yeah. And I just wonder how far left and evil the Republicans have to get before Christians finally just say, I can't support this anymore, whatever. Let the chips fall where they may. It's sort of a ends justifies the means approach, right? And so, we saw this with Germany. We see this throughout history where, if you say, well, there's less harm done with this rather than standing on principle. That's the whole lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're not giving God a chance to be God and work. That's my view. That's my view.
No, I think I just want to pause as we continue slowly and help people absorb and process what you just shared, because I believe it's very important. It's very important. I like Donald Trump. I really do. I like a lot of the things he did when he was in office. But I agree with you on being pro-LGBTQ. And he wants to be all things to all people, and he's not drawing any lines morally. And as Christians who read the Bible, we've got to be discerning. And I'm not saying I'm not going to vote for Trump. And I'm not saying I'm not going to vote, period. So people would ask the next logical question, and we're under 2 minutes already, JB.
Yeah.
I got a comment on our podcast that we did last week on your show, and they said, well, are you not going to vote, or are you going to vote independent? Now, you don't have to share what you're going to do, but these are the conclusions. People can only think, all right, these are the possibilities. Go ahead and wrap us up here in the last minute and a half.
Yeah, just briefly, I would say that's exactly what they want us to think, is we only have one of two choices. As long as we choose that, they're happy. But that's not the case. In many states, there are multiple candidates on the ballot. Now, people would look at it from a human standpoint and say, oh, well, if you vote for a third-party candidate, you're throwing your vote away. Well, then basically what you're saying is God can only work within the artificially created two-party system. Well, that's not my God. My God's bigger than that. So you can also write candidates in. I do believe voting is a personal, private matter. I think people know my view on the rigged system. I've talked about it for years, written about it in several books. But I don't think it's appropriate to ask someone who they're going to vote for. But I would just encourage believers to pray about it, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, and then respect others who may disagree.
I would just say to everybody watching, listening, don't lose heart. God is sovereign, and your choice should never be not voting as a U.S. citizen and having any responsibility to let your voice be heard and protect and love your neighbor. If you don't vote, that's not helping at all. So, JB, this is a good conversation. As you said before we got on, we were talking about this. Some people don't like it, but we've got to talk about all these details from a biblical perspective, because worldview does matter. Notbyworks.org. Make sure you guys check the 3rd edition of Getting the Gospel Wrong. Thank you for your time, JB. Love you, man.
You bet. Love you, brother. God bless.
Thank you. Good conversation, guys. We've got to be thinkers. We've got to be just working through these things and encourage people to keep fighting, keep believing, keep praying, and yes, keep voting. But anyway, we've got to move on. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.